The microphone wasn't on. Hello!
Or maybe I should break into song before the podcast so nobody has to hear it. That would probably be a better option. And that would just be punishment that you don't deserve. So,
I think you have a good singing voice. Hi, everyone.
I don't even have a good speaking voice these days. Hello, everyone. We're here. We're back. Like animated dinosaurs, we are back.
Whoa!
Like
nobody knows that movie. Nobody knows
Every kid
that
from the 90s
movie.
knows that movie.
I guarantee you I am the only person. Every time I bring up that movie, everyone's like, what? I'm like, John Goodman. John Goodman was in it.
I've got at least 3 kids who would know that movie for sure. Ricky and Jesse could probably quote it too.
Loved that movie.
Ethan probably could quote it
and
too.
And it feels so obscure to me whenever I bring it up to anybody. They're like, what?
Gabe would be like, what are you talking about?
Well, he's a fetus, so.
He is a different generation for you guys.
He is. I forget that sometimes.
I think Ethan technically falls on the front end of Generation Z as well. But, yeah.
Whoa. Sorry, I can't form words now that you threw that out there.
This is millennial excitement.
Such a weird movie, too. Like, now thinking about it as an adult, like they ate cereal.
You know how many of those movies were very weird? How many movies now are super weird?
I don't know. Movies from, like, the 90s, especially kids' movies. Bizarre.
All dogs go to heaven. You know, there's a lot of weird stuff.
Very weird. Hello, everyone.
Fern Gully. Does it get weirder?
It does not get weirder than Fern Gully.
Oh, well, Anastasia was pretty weird. That was a good movie.
Anastasia was not weirder than Fern Gully.
They're both pretty weird, though.
And Anastasia has a killer soundtrack.
And it had Urkel in it, so, he was the chicken dude. I can't think of the name.
What? It had Jaleel White?
Yeah. But not like doing any recognizable voice or anything. So
he wasn't Bartok. That was Hank Azaria.
No, it was some other obscure.
Hold, please. Thing. Welcome to 2022, where clearly we are still on the ball about everything.
Hello, Google. So, and hopefully I'm not going to embarrass myself by being wrong about this, but
1997.
It was. It was an obscure thing, and
I
remember thinking afterwards, I'm like, what in the world is Urkel here for when you wouldn't even know that it's him?
Kirsten Dunst was young Anastasia.
Get out. I did not know that. Maybe I'm thinking of a different one.
I think you are, because Urkel ain't in this.
I forgot Kelsey Grammer was in there.
He was the Russian guy, Vladimir.
I forgot. He did a good Russian guy. You know who else does a great Russian dude? Alec Baldwin as Santa in Rise of the Guardians.
I've never seen
that. My goodness. It's a bad dude. Santa is a big, bad Russian dude with tats. And it is
I'll have to watch that.
I have still not seen the entire movie, but every time I walk into my mom's house, she's like, oh, here, you have to watch this. Oh, here. So I've seen probably not every time I walk into the house, because sometimes she's watching Hallmark movies or something else. But
Jaleel White's not in this.
I'm going to have to figure out which one I'm thinking of that he is in. But
I'll look up his
something
IMDb
around that same time, very same time frame. Anyhow, do I smell like smoke today?
I can't smell anything.
Oh, good.
So I haven't been able to smell anything since
COVID recovery
Christmas.
from you. So
yeah.
Good news is you don't get to smell the smoke on me.
Bad news is I don't get to smell anything good either. So
except for 5 minutes of chocolate chip cookies after your neti pot.
After my neti pot.
What a good time that was.
Would you like to talk about my neti pot experience?
Oh, man, would I. This is
the
the Sinus Rents podcast. Something gross.
Something gross. We've been there before.
That's our new title. Something gross.
So yeah, I can't smell anything or taste anything, which is kind of a bummer because I enjoy eating.
So yeah, we are moved into temporarily. Why
can't I find
Gabe and Kayla's place that they were renting. They just bought a house, and so we're.
I didn't know that you'd moved in there.
Yeah, my daughter-in-law's uncle has a little cabin cottage house place that they rent out, and so for anybody that doesn't know, we're trying to build a home out at the farm, at our family farm, and so in the process we need to sell the house that we're currently living in to be able to do that. So to make that easier, we're moving into the place where my son and daughter were previously living. And so one of the things that we're discovering through this process is that
I tell you, I think you're on drugs.
I will find it.
Quest for Camelot?
Yeah,
I've never seen that.
That is the one, yeah.
He's Blee Block?
Yep, annoying little, and you would never recognize it.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
This is why.
Sorry.
That's why I got it confused with
Anastasia way up here.
Quest
for Camelot.
Watch Quest for Camelot, and it's not as good, not as musical,
It doesn't have John Cusack, so.
Well, that's true.
Did I tell you I met John Cusack?
No, but he's spent
John
some
Cusack.
time here. Did you meet him in Three Oaks? Or did
Yes,
you meet
and I
somewhere
met
else?
Joan.
Yeah.
Nice little fam.
She's got
They
a
had
nice
a
little
house
place over
when
there.
I worked at Graziano's.
Yeah,
They would
my
order
cousin
pizza.
Bobby used to be the caretaker
Yeah.
for him, take care of the
They
grounds
used to
out
frequently order pizza,
there. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Jason kept doing it.
and I just wanted him to come into the pizza place and hold up a big stereo. And
Of course you did.
That's all I wanted.
And
Never did.
how could
He
you
could
not
hold up a
want
pizza
that?
box. I don't care. I would play some Peter Gabriel, and it would all be great. Anyway,
Just going to say, playing Peter Gabriel is usually not a bad thing.
no, it's not. So circling back, you're moving.
We are, and we're discovering that there are a lot of non-controllables in this process. A lot of things that we have a plan. We're trying to make
Right.
this go. We should have already had it built and been in there, but there are things that don't go the way we expect, and
Amen.
so. It kind of reminds me, as we were talking about that, of what we were looking at on Sunday with this whole idea of trying to build a house, and we're kind of going into this parenting series about parenting foundations. And the memory verse that we had for this particular sermon on Psalm 127 is Psalm 127:1. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards watch in vain. And so, did I get that right? The guards stand watch in vain. I'm bouncing back and forth between old NIV, new NIV, and King James in my head, and so trying to get it right. That's always the
King James.
challenge. I don't remember. I just know that it taints, because that's what I learned things in as a kid.
Yeah.
And that taints is probably a derogatory term. I don't mean that, but it ends up coloring
Right.
other things. So then, even if I don't remember the verse, there will be parts of it that
Right.
will come out.
Just add an F at the
So
end.
I
of
have
everything.
this syncretistic memorization
Right.
process, and so when
The
Emma
Lord
and
just
I
buildeth the house.
when my daughter and I are working on it, sometimes she'll get it quicker than I will, even if it's a verse I already know, because I'll throw in extra words from previous passes. But
What's interesting to me, I know you just covered the first part of this passage, but what's interesting is that Psalm 127, it feels like two very separate ideas.
yeah.
But they are connected somehow.
Yeah, and as we're looking at this on Sunday in the sermon, we're kind of had to do some background. If we're going to look at any passage of Scripture, we want to know the context. Who wrote it, who was it written to, and who was it written to? That tells us who it was written for.
Right.
What is it that author originally intended for that original audience to receive from this, because God put these things into that author for those people for a purpose. And so when we look at the genre, the kind of writing that it is, that changes our understanding of it. It's real easy with the Psalms. In fact, I did this for years, and Dave DeHaan and I, a recent guest, we talked about the fact that the dig and discover principles that we work on and promote, that Word Partners is built on in training pastors around the world, that really changed my way of looking at the Psalms. I understood it differently, and I've been pastoring here for 18 years. I've been to seminary. I've preached through individual Psalms, but I never looked at the Psalms as one book before, as a deliberate, intentional. Yes, it's a compilation of songs, and the history, but until you see that it's compiled deliberately to tell a story, to carry out a particular purpose, that really changes how you look at it. So when we understand that this was, it's a song of Solomon, it's something that was written long before it was compiled into the book of Psalms, which the book of Psalms, as we know, it was compiled after the exiled Jews had returned to Jerusalem and rebuilt the temple and the city, and so now the priests and the Levites have brought these things together. So you're talking about multiple authors. David wrote the biggest chunk, but there are at least 8 different. There's a section that we, just 50 of the 100 we don't know who wrote them. So probably a compendium there that's coming from all of the folks involved in it's a good comic book word, from all of those who are compiling this at that time. And so when we have these unknown psalms, this is my take. I don't know that everybody would agree with me on this. I think the majority of those are from those compilers who were not wanting to be named at that point. So anyway, as they're putting this together, they're telling the story of Israel with God, and really it's not so much telling the narrative story. We already have the history books for that, but there's an emotive story that comes out, as we know with any kind of music. As a songwriter, you get that there's the words, and then there's the vibe, there's the feeling, the emotions that come out of that. And so the book of Psalms is written it's compiled in 5 sections, 5 books that are a lot like the acts of a play or the movements of a symphony that kind of that carry the whole thing along. And in Psalm 127 is in the 5th book. And in this last book, the people of Israel have returned to Jerusalem. So now all of the despair of feeling God's rejection of them and wondering how in the world can we possibly worship God in this foreign land? Everything is hopeless. Everything is dark. God has forgotten us. God has turned his back on us. We've sinned too far. We've gone too far for God to ever take us back. They received the hope from the prophets that this will happen, that God will redeem them, and they go through a long period of having hope for that, but not having seen it. Then God brings them back. So what he does, just what he had said that he would do, now these Psalms rejoice in that. They remind the Jewish people that, look, if we do anything without God, it's a waste. Mm-hmm. Here are the things that God rejected us for in the first place. We need to hold to him. We need to cling to his word. So it's not an accident that in this 5th book, this most celebratory book of the book of Psalms, you have Psalm 119, this epic, sort of a love song to God's word. And the whole thing is cling to God's word, cling to God's word. So now in Psalm 127, excuse me, new supercut.
That's a good one too.
We see this picture that Solomon wrote before all of these things happened.
Right.
Now the compilers are reading Solomon's psalm, this song from his heart for the people, and it's not hard. Some say that it's not really from Solomon, but that David wrote it for Solomon. In either case, that it doesn't really change a lot, but it's pretty hard in my mind to argue against the Solomonic authorship, if you will, of the psalm when it sounds so much like the book of Ecclesiastes. I mean, it's just it is so clear when he's saying, just from the jump, he's saying, unless the Lord builds the house, its builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchmen stand guard in vain. In vain you rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat, for he grants sleep to those he loves. Everything about that sounds like Ecclesiastes. Solomon has done the work. He's built the city. He's built the house. He's built the temple. So, we see this house. We should have in mind the way the Jews would have as they were reading it, talking about the temple. But clearly he's also talking about the family, because he spends the second part talking about sons and children being heritage from the Lord and this great reward. So all of this together is the picture, and that was our core reality, that our best plans and efforts only matter if God is behind them. Ultimately, as a king, as a nation builder, Solomon came to realize that. I think in his great wisdom, the wisest man to ever live, in great wealth and great prosperity, the strength, the influence, the long arm of Israel reaching throughout the region. And you think about how tiny Israel is.
Right.
Hugely outsized influence for the Queen of Sheba to come and seek wisdom, and for people to just bring wealth to say, here, say something smart. I'm going to give you money, say something smart.
All 3 C's in the Pacific Ocean are pronounced differently.
Okay, That's good stuff.
I saw a meme of that the other day.
Quite brilliant.
Anyway.
But for him then, with all of those things, to wander from the Lord, to do exactly the opposite of what God had told him to do, that speaks to the nature of our hearts, the sin nature within us. As wise as Solomon was, as gifted as Solomon was, he amassed many wives, 700 some wives, which you got to be pretty smart just to keep up with,
or not.
And you got to be pretty stupid to get in that situation.
Right.
But that was a pagan way of sealing deals and forming treaties and so on and so forth. So they have all this peace and prosperity by doing it not God's way. So many things he did God's way.
Yeah,
so many things he did not God's way.
Right.
He also was the wealthiest king. And so he's resplendent in his glory and has chariots and horses, specifically the opposite of what God commanded of Israel's kings. So here now in Psalm 127, we're seeing this picture that, man, stop it. Just stop doing your own thing. Get on board with what God's doing. And I think Rick Warren said that in his book, Purpose Driven Church, long before The Purpose Driven Life became this massively popular book. He wrote a book about church. And one of the key aspects in there, one of the key elements, was rather than asking God to bless what you're doing, work at doing what God is blessing. See what it is where is God moving? How is he impacting? And get on board with that. Do what God is showing you to do, rather than saying, here's my vision, here's what I want, now God bless it. God make this work. And I think far too often in our churches we do that. I think far too often as Americans we do that. Lord bless our nation, even though our nation totally thumbs its nose at you. We do it in churches all the time. We want to do things our way and fit in with the world and then ask God to bless it. That's not how any of this works. But we do that with our families. We raise our children according to a standard that is not the biblical standard. It's not what God has given us. And that's why we're using this particular psalm as a backdrop. Even though it's not specifically a parenting psalm, obviously it connects to it. Solomon makes that connection himself. It's not instructional as far as here's how to raise your children.
Right.
The Bible does tell us what to do and how to raise our children. This psalm does not. But I think if we don't have this as our foundation, then we're going to be in a pretty shaky place. Right. So to be able to recognize whatever I do, if my children have the cutest holiday pictures that I can send out to everybody in the cards and so on. By the way, cute holiday card.
I didn't have pictures.
and usually we do from you. But you make up for that by putting, 8,000, which is about a quarter as many as my daughter-in-law, on Facebook.
She puts a bunch at once.
I know, right?
Girl.
So I'm like, I'm gonna put a love on this
like the whole album,
and then I'll look through it over time.
Right.
Although now I don't see them because I'm not really on Facebook. So. I'll still show up to post and then get off again and delete it.
You're smart.
So delete, download. Anyhow, but our kids can be great. They can be super happy. They can have all the best grades. They can go to the best school. They can be the greatest athletes.
All the best words.
Have all the best words. They can sing "Shut Up and Dance" or no. What was the song that George was doing?
Everybody dance now.
Everybody dance now. That's right. Or just sing Dance Now.
Right.
Speaking of Facebook, if you're on Facebook and you follow Stacey, which you should, Stacey Kuziel.
Don't follow me unless I know you. Don't be weird.
Yeah, if you don't know her, then
if you're in England, don't follow me.
Or if you do, make sure you connect through the podcast so that we know.
Right. I'm happy to talk to you.
But you got to see the video of this kid. He cracks me up. Anyhow,
he's all right.
So you can be super cute. You can be super educated. You can be talented, popular, homecoming queen, class president, all those things.
People will write songs about you.
That's right. You can, all the things. Right. You can have all the things. And it doesn't do a stitch of good.
And it's so...
if God's not behind it.
Right. And it's so well, I don't know. It's I don't know what the right word. It's certainly not a slap in the face because it's obvious. But it's like a reminder as a parent, especially because we spend, and I'm guilty of this too, I spend so much time like doing those things. Right. Like you got to get good grades, you got to do this, you got to do da-da-da-da. that it's easy to forget that without God as your foundation, it's just I'm setting my child up for failure. You said something on Sunday that none of that matters if your kid's going to hell,
right.
and like that it's like whoa.
And
you're
very often
100% right.
by pushing those things, very often we can punch our kid's ticket there,
right,
because we create a situation that insulates them from the pain that God is using to work a greater glory. We can keep them from all harm, and yet if that is what causes them to learn,
right?
And most of us can recognize that nobody likes a spoiled kid. Nobody likes the kid, the spoiled rich kid. The picture that in again, the movies of the 80s and 90s and all the high school kids, the super popular rich kid who's mean
John
and terrible,
Hughes movies,
every John Hughes movie, and
the
those
Jake Ryans.
Those are not the people that you like.
Right.
They've got everything, but nobody likes them. Mean Girls, picture of this kind of stuff.
I can't help it that I'm Bobby.
my dog makes fetch happen. So I just saw a T-shirt like that.
Now look at Lacey Chabert.
How far have we fallen from our? I was determining the new year we were going to stay on track.
That was a fruitless effort for about
So anyway,
you should have told me that. I screwed that up in about 3
I didn't want to set myself up for disappointment.
They do say all New Year's resolutions fail within like the first 2 weeks.
So anyway, as we're doing this, when we put our children in that position where essentially we make idols out of them,
right.
When they become more important than doing God's will.
No parent wants to see their kids suffer or struggle or whatever.
No, and it's our job to protect them
right.
appropriately, but we can't protect them from everything.
Right.
So we need to make sure that we're not sending them into the world bubble wrapped.
What is that?
We're teaching them how to actually deal with life, and literally, and we'll be talking about this in the rest of the series, to connect the reality of God to the realities of life. Our kids are going to live these experiences, and if God's not in it, and if it's not purposeful, then it all ends up empty.
There's a quote from Finding Nemo where
can't go wrong.
Where Marlin's like, I promised I'd never let anything happen to him.
Right.
And Dory said, well, you can't promise them you'd never let anything happen to him, then nothing would ever happen to him.
That's right.
Not much fun for little Nemo.
Best role ever for Ellen DeGeneres, by the way.
But yeah, that's exactly right. And, if the issues that kids have when you look back at them as adults are often very minute, but in the moment they can feel
huge.
like enormous. And so nobody wants to see that for their child. But at the same time, there are these opportunities for huge lessons and growth. And if God isn't at the center of it, then again, you're kind of setting them up for a life where they don't need to turn to God in their greater struggles as adults.
And God will do what God has set forth to do.
Right.
And so if we put obstacles in their path, God's still going to accomplish what he's going to accomplish, but we end up creating a greater pain, sometimes in the protection. We cause ourselves all sorts of worry when it's unfounded. Well, what if this happens? Well, what if it does? The idea, Shelley and I think we've brought this up on the podcast before. We'll watch some of the CW Arrowverse shows that we enjoy. I haven't watched them in a while now, but one of the things that just yanks my chain every time is the hero always promises that it'll be fine. I'll take care of this. Nothing will ever happen to you. I'll defend you, and blah blah blah. I promise, I promise, I promise. Everybody promises, and they all lie because you can't promise these things. There are uncontrollable things, just like in building a house. There are things that you just simply cannot control. You're not meant to control. So stop. I'm not saying don't make promises, but let's use our brains. Think about the things. Promise things that you control, like to have the best character that you can have. I promise to do the things that I'm supposed to do, but understand that all of us are going to fail. We're going to do that. There are zero perfect parents. Mary and Joseph were not perfect parents. Now, I may have Catholic friends that are going to yell about that. The reality is they were humans, just like the rest of us. Jesus was perfect. His parents were not. So you can use that as a lesson that our children can survive our failures and foibles. But all 5 of my children know they do not have a perfect dad. It takes all of one evening to figure that out. Usually somewhere around 8:30, 9 o'clock, things start to turn south.
Get a little sleepy.
Get a little cranky. But, as we're going through life, if we make our children into idols, we are putting them ahead of God. We're prioritizing our children ahead of God. Oh, I would never do that. Look at where you're spending your time, your money, your energy. What are your conversations about? Are you spending as much time talking to your children about the Bible as you are about what they did at school that day?
Right.
Are you focusing your money and your time and attention on training them up in the way that they should go, in raising them in the training and instruction of the Lord as you are in their schooling, in their sports, in their entertainment? Are they spending as much time in God's Word as they are watching Disney movies or Blippi?
Nothing. My child spends more time watching.
But this is a reality. And if we don't take inventory of what we're doing as parents, and we just let these things happen because it's natural, things will happen naturally, and we'll think we're doing a good job, but we're not. We're building on a foundation of sand. And old leadership adage that you can climb the ladder of success and get to the top and find out it's leaning against the wrong building. That's what we end up doing. And so then we have our kids and we measure our parenting and our family relationships according to worldly standards. What does the world see as valuable? And we totally miss it. And so as we're going through this series, I really hope that's that backdrop of, unless the Lord builds this, none of it matters. I hope that's going to really become something that is clear in our minds. I think this week I'm going to change a little bit of what I was planning for the series, and we'll focus in a little more on the second half of this psalm. Still working that out. I feel like I shortchanged that a little bit on Sunday. It was a little top heavy, and so I don't want to miss what Solomon is saying here, especially in our world where fewer and fewer people are choosing to have kids. They're having kids later and later. We're having fewer kids. And one of the big reasons for that is we have plans. I got stuff to do. I don't want to sacrifice my great life by bringing kids into it. We see pregnancy as a punishment. That's what happens when you're not careful enough. Even in married contexts, we have these kinds of conversations, and we make jokes about it. So then abortion, whether it's legal or illegal, it is always immoral. And when we as a nation see that as a viable option, because we're removing a burden, we're getting rid of a problem, then we do not have the same view of children that God has. And that's pretty important for us to recognize, that children are a good thing. They're a blessing from God. They're a reward. Not everyone has children, but every relationship, every coupling relationship that God ordains in the created order is prone to that. There may be obstacles. There may be reasons why not, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go, whether this week or later on. Because what I don't want to have happen from this series or from this past week's sermon or from today's conversation is for people to feel like, well, if God blesses through children, if this is all a good thing, then boy, he must not be blessing me because I don't have children.
Right.
We've tried, we really wanted to, and we weren't able to, or any number of different things. Or for someone to be overwhelmed by guilt, especially someone who has had an abortion, or multiple. There are so many people, so many women who are hurting today because they've been lied to. They were told that this is not a problem and it's not going to affect you, and it does. And years later, decades later, I get the stories I've had women come and say, no, it doesn't bother me at all. And I tend to think the lady doth protest too much, but I've talked to many others who literally decades later are still haunted by this. And nobody is dealing with that as we continue as a society to perpetrate lies that harm women. We call it helping women, but we're harming them.
Don't even go there.
So
we'd have to have another hour podcast.
So I think we're going to need to actually spend some time looking at that. And I don't want those who have, through whatever means, who feel like they've blown it, who feel like, I'm too far gone, or God can't forgive this, or I can't forgive this. I don't want you to be caught up in that guilt, and we'll address that a little more specifically as we go on in the series. Pardon me.
Getting good ones too.
Yeah, I tell you.
It's the dry air.
Well,
And you've been
we have all wood heat in this place that we're staying in, so
smoky.
with all wood heat, it's very dry air, and this sinus infection is just not really going away.
You should try.
It's better.
An Eddie pot.
Oh, believe me, I've done the sinus rinse, not the pot, but I've done the.
I've not done the pot.
The spray bottle. Another podcast. There are lots of those podcasts out there. I'll tell you what.
I've not done the pot.
In fact, there are podcasts out there
Hey.
called Something Real.
Are they?
Discovered, so.
If people aren't calling those podcasts,
I mean,
they're
how can
missing
you
out
not?
on a gold. Anyway.
So anyway, as we're going through this, I think also just in some of the faces that I saw on Sunday morning, there are people who have already raised their children, and some who are wrestling with the fact that they didn't do it God's way; they did it their way. Some recognize it wasn't a good way. Some think it was a good way. I got a good relationship with my kids, but I didn't do that.
I would do anything for love, but I won't do that.
And some are offended by the fact that I'm saying some of these things, and some are not offended but convicted and struggling with the pain of it. And I just want to assure everyone that as we go through this, God's grace is bigger, and if we're still breathing, it's not too late to surrender to Him in this.
Right.
It doesn't mean we can fix the past, because we can't. Excuse me. You're gonna have to.
I'm gonna try to wrap things up here because Rich is not able to breathe. But we will dive more into that next week. So if you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to contact us at somethingreal@reallifeonline.org, or you can leave us a voicemail at 269-756-RLCC. Or you can leave us a comment on Facebook or YouTube, or you can use the Anchor app to leave us a voicemail if you use that to listen to your podcasts. I'm going to sign out by myself, which feels really weird. But be sure to join us throughout this series. And if you have any questions ahead of time, use that email address and we will discuss it in next week's podcast. I'm going to try this season, quote unquote, to also kind of put a prompt out there before we do podcasts weekly, and so see if we can get any questions right before. You okay?
I'm back like an animated dinosaur.
We began and end that way.
Sure sign that the Sudafed has run out.
Okay, well, we're going to end it. I just did our whole little wrap thing, so
awesome.
You don't have to talk anymore.
That's a win.
So thank you guys for listening, and we will catch you next week, and hopefully you're feeling better. And less dry. I'll let you borrow the neti pot. Bye, everyone. Yeah, maybe not.